Welcome to another emergency edition of the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. This is Sunday, March 1st, 2026. We're recording this at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're just going to talk about the last day or so in the war with the Iranian regime. Joining me, as always, Executive Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
I think I said editor, but you are in fact editor. And another editor, senior editor, Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And of course, commentary contributing editor and host of the Breaking History podcast and columnist and writer at the Free Press, Eli Lake. Hi, Eli.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so important details. A lot of different things going on. Iran has now apparently fired on 10 countries, not just Israel, which of course is a direct combatant and is itself, dropping lots of ordnance and doing all kinds of things in Iran, but apparently is hit all around the Gulf, now targeting Cyprus and others, the purpose of which seems to be to say, we're going to be mean to you until you put pressure on the Americans to stop this war. And it seems to be having, based on public statements, entirely the opposite effect. That the Saudis have now basically agreed to go all in. Even Britain, which yesterday issued an incredibly pusillanimous statement because apparently a base somewhere other, the British got involved in some fashion, are now sending Typhoons. France has spoken and is somehow joining the fight, and various Gulf nations are saying, are expressing outrage. Qatar has closed its embassy in Tehran, Qatar, of course, being like the kind of catamite of Tehran. So whatever the Iranians are up to, they seem to be very discombobulated and are adopting a strategy that is backfiring on them, unless somebody can tell me otherwise.
I mean, add to that there was an interim supreme leader who was appointed. He even had a Twitter account in English. And apparently he's been eliminated 11 hours into his tenure.
Is this confirmed?
It's not like been confirmed and the ultimate confirmed set, but like all Israeli media,
right,
from what I can tell, have reported that he has been eliminated. He's been eliminated faster than we can learn his name.
Right.
So we don't know his name. If we could look it up right now, but it doesn't matter what his name is because he's dead. So I think this is an important moment because it does create the conditions under which the supreme leadership of Iran becomes the drummer from Spinal Tap. It is the job
grand opening, grand closing.
That you die the minute that you get it. And by the way, that's a joke, but it's not really a joke. If you create the circumstances in which the idea is, if you pop up to become a leading figure in the regime post everything that's happened this weekend, and you get, this is a way of saying to everybody, whoa, don't try to be the Ayatollah now. Don't try to be the supreme leader now. Don't try to be the head of the IRGC now. Don't try to be the head of anything. Don't pop your head up from outside of your rabbit hole because you're going to get killed. That is a very important step on the way to making sure that the regime cannot reconstitute itself under these circumstances.
I have way back. I think it was during the Intifada. This is a funny sentence, but way back during the Intifada, when the Daily Show was funny, they had this great.
Funny, but okay, go ahead.
They had this sketch where, Jon Stewart was at the desk, and it was probably Stephen Colbert out in the field. I don't remember, but the field was Israel, Gaza, and he was saying Hamas leader's been eliminated. And Jon Stewart says they have any idea who will take his place, and he says, "Yeah, I'm just getting word it's so and so." And then he goes, "Okay, thank you." And then he interrupts Johnny. "John, we're just getting word that so and so has been killed." Well, is there any indication of who might take his place? And this went on for like
Right.
four or
Yeah.
five people, but that's what it reminds you of. It reminds you of the
Right.
targeted assassination strategy that is unusual to see anywhere else. It was confined to the
Well,
Arab-Israeli conflict for the most
It
part.
happened in Lebanon with Hezbollah
Right.
during the bombing of the headquarters, and then the pager operation. Is that, I mean, it literally would happen that they would say they have a new director of military operations, and then 3 hours later Israel would say we killed him, or and 6 or 7 different times. And then of course there's the famous deck of cards, which we sort of began, I think,
That was
in
an
the
Iraq
Gulf War.
thing. Yeah.
Right, in the Gulf War, but with Iraq. But the deck of cards of the Hamas leadership, and then it happened with the Hamas leadership as well. But I mean, tactically speaking, this mission seems to be we are going at these sites, the military sites, and the leadership, decapitating the leadership. And then what is important is the war doesn't end. So the idea is, if you're going to mow down and decapitate the first wave or the first set of leaders of the regime, you wait until the second one comes, like a surf, and then you eliminate them, and so on, until either there is no one left, or there is a little guy, like in a cartoon, with a little white flag, waving the little white flag out of the hole, which Trump has already indicated he's gotten little bits of emanations,
he says he
of
talked to the new
information.
leadership.
Yeah, that new leadership, possible new leadership, is indicating it wants to talk.
Right.
Anyway,
What does that
So
mean?
I have a technical question here. Maybe Eli, you could help me with this a little bit.
Yeah.
So there has been this contingency plan in place, as one would expect, among the Iranian leadership in the event of a sort of decapitation strike. This council of experts convenes and does something, waves the wand over someone, and they become that. Now, my question is: have the have the losses that the Iranian leadership suffered so far been such that the people in the regime who are supposed to constitute and enact this contingency, are they also gone? So is it sort of catch as catch can, or is I don't know the answer.
There was a revealing interview on Al Jazeera with Iran's foreign minister Arachi, who just kind of casually said that he kind of acknowledged that there was no command and control at this point with various units. Now, I don't know if that applies to everything. They're certainly firing things off, but it does seem that we're looking at an implosion.
well, by the way, so this afternoon, a couple of different people have told me that the chatter in the world of people who hear chatter, so this is secondhand chatter, is that this afternoon, it's not that the tide turned or anything, because there isn't really the tide all seems to be flowing in one direction anyway, but that the sense of the discombobulation of the regime and everything that's going on there has in fact started to turn into a kind of degrading route is evident. And the real evidence is a slowdown rather than a speed up in the firing of the ballistic missiles. Like 600 or 700 were fired off yesterday. That number is maybe half or a third of what it was. And the worry is always that they're holding stuff back, and then they're just gonna, when you least expect it, there'll be some second strike that comes out of nowhere and does immense damage. But that seems illogical if you are under relentless unimaginable bombardment, as Iran is. The idea that the thing that you would do is not throw everything you have at the enemy as you have it, just to get them to stop or to push them back a little or something. There's no strategy that says, it's not like rope-a-dope, like, here, fire all this stuff at us and we'll just take it and then we'll come back, because we're not limited. We have hundreds of ships and planes and thousands of military options at our disposal, which they must know. And so it's not like, okay, you ran out of your ammunition, now we're going to fire at you and you can't do anything about it. Like, the Hail Mary play is to go with everything at once now, and if they're not doing it, it may be that they can't.
Well,
they know they can't match step for step, so which is why they're shooting at Bahrain and Qatar and anywhere that the U.S. may have personnel and bases, or anywhere that they think will, as they say, pressure the U.S. to make it stop. But that seems to be their Hail Mary play. They're not even pretending they can go toe to toe, but they're trying to make it. This is the sort of thing that I think will backfire also, because if the U.S. because again, we're not limited. If we start believing that Iran has to be leveled, its missiles have to be completely taken out, every inch of them, for us to be safe in our air bases in the region, then that's what we'll do. And so the normal reaction would be to hit them harder, but that seems to be the Hail Mary for whatever it's worth.
Well, I mean, 2 points to think about. One is they managed today to have lots of people in Tehran, Isfahan, and probably other cities mourning Khamenei. That does not freak me out. I think that there's a minority of kind of the brainwashed true believers in the country. So I don't even think necessarily to compel some of those people, but certainly the regime wanted to kind of put out a show of public strength. So we saw those photographs. And then the other, which we were talking about before we went on, is we have this incident in El Paso. There's this developing situation as we're talking in Washington, D.C. on the Beltway. Are there lone wolves that have been activated by Iran, or were they here and, this is the moment when they're going to be activated? We don't even know if any of them are connected to it. It could just be mentally ill people who have clung to the news and, justified their wanton violence, because of that. But there is a possibility the Iranians are the leading state sponsor of terror. In many ways, they were, I would argue, they're kind of like the Henry Ford of modern Islamic terror. So maybe that's part of the response too. And then the other thing you hear is that U.S. officials are worried about possible cyber attacks on infrastructure. We haven't seen that yet, but that's another possibility of what we could see in terms of their response.
So what you mentioned are these two incidents. The surprising thing was there was the shooting at a bar, this bar in Austin at 2 a.m, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and to hear suddenly that the authorities are concerned that there might be a terrorist aspect to it, which is now very clear because the clear photographic image of the shooter, who is born in Senegal and a naturalized U.S. citizen. He was wearing a shirt that said "Property of Islam" on it. Somebody, interestingly, I don't know why I'm laughing. It's like embarrassing because it's obviously very evil, but like somebody dug up an enraged tweet he sent at Laura Loomer. The far right wing, suddenly neo passionate Zionist after having converted to Christianity 5 or 6 years ago. Anyway, he sent like this enraged tweet at her, which suggests an ideological framework to his actions. So there's a thing about, is he just a mentally ill guy? Is he just a lone wolf who went and shooting somewhere? Or have they pre-positioned or pre-planted weird terrorist actors around America? Yeah.
Having had no professional experience in counterterrorism, this profile doesn't. So for whatever we know of it, doesn't strike me at all as an activated Iranian cell member. You wouldn't be tweeting
Right.
at Laura Loomer.
Yeah. Right.
I don't think
Unless the tweet at Laura Loomer is what got him recruited. But I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Fair
Like,
enough. Fair,
but I'm not saying, and it would be a weird,
yeah.
right? And it would also be a weird, like, what's the purpose of that? What do you? It's not a big enough event, and if he doesn't leave a manifesto, if he's in there screaming, this is to avenge the murder of the Ayatollah, I don't know what purpose it serves. And this car crash. Yeah,
I just want to say it's interesting to me because we get to the car crash because 90% of the time when we get a confirmed Islamist terrorist attack in this country, and authorities say it's a lone wolf, I'm suspicious, and sometimes I'm sort of proven correct in my suspicion. Like, it's not really a lone wolf. There seems to have been something murky, some traveling plans, some associates, some something. And I have to say, this time it's almost the opposite, where I feel as if the way the law enforcement described the Austin shooter, indications of a nexus to terrorism would make one think that he's involved in a sort of web. And look, I know nothing, but as I said, nothing about it really strikes me as anything other than an actual lone wolf.
Right.
Down to the shirt, down to the location, down to the time. Yes.
Right. I mean, it would be better for Iran, let's say, or like it would be better. It would be more. Iran would be a more alarming adversary if this were a lone wolf, because you look at this, you go, that really, this is what you got? Like, this is you sent a guy into a bar in Austin.
Yeah,
that's that.
Well, and Iran has,
if there are 500 incidents like this in the next week, then I would say otherwise.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
Okay.
But Iran also has planned attacks on U.S. soil that we sort of know their style a bit already. We know that they tried to assassinate the Saudi official in Washington, D.C. in a cafe, right? We know that through Hezbollah they do drug smuggling and things like that. We have a sort of picture, at least, of what Iranians. We know they tried to assassinate Masih al-Nijad, as they've done, in German and French cafes for a long time, assassinating dissidents or Iranians that annoy them. So we've had a couple of attacks that we've really actually investigated, gotten all the facts out there and said, here is what the Islamic Republic of Iran was quite literally planning to do. And this isn't the sort of thing that they would do. And also, if they had something, this wouldn't be the top, like, this wouldn't be the thing that happens first. I can't know what's in their heads, but they have a certain style when they try to pull off attacks on U.S. soil, and it doesn't fit it, but it is something we should be looking for, because they have tried attacks on U.S. soil.
Well,
and we do know what those look like, and those have, global implications as concerns the Saudis.
What they don't have, and why we can look for a different signature, is they aren't Al-Qaeda. They don't have we're going to send 20 people to do something colossal and gigantic. They look to assassinate individuals there, and obviously they haven't had a lot of success on U.S. soil, because they tried to kill John Bolton. They targeted Brian Hook. They targeted Trump. They've done this and they haven't, from what we can tell, unless the guy in Butler, Pennsylvania, whose motivations still remain completely opaque and bizarrely undefinable, unless he was somehow an Iranian asset. They really, this isn't their great success. They've had better success in Europe and elsewhere, and that's something, by the way, to watch in the next couple of days if they do things, because obviously their idea is, we can't really get to the Americans, and we're doing what we can to get to the Israelis, but that's why we're trying to scare everybody else into telling us to say uncle. Then there's this other story, which is interesting, that the Saudis seem to be getting in on, that there seems to be a reason that the Saudis want to let it be known that Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, was a key actor in the past week in being like the Margaret Thatcher of this operation. Like, he's the one who was calling Trump and saying, don't go wobbly. You got to go and hit Iran, and hit Iran hard. It's not just Netanyahu, which is striking because we'd been hearing for 6 months that the Saudis were starting to play footsie with the Islamic Republic, and were maybe trying to find a different way to deal with their own geopolitical problems relating to this Shia-Sunni fight between Saudi Arabia and Iran, this historical fight. And that, we were all alarmed by that, right? Oh my God, like are the Saudis giving up and trying to make a separate peace with Iran? Apparently, no, that is not what happened. And they really did want to let it be known. And the administration is happy to let it be known that it's not just Israel that is involved in the planning here, that Trump was getting pushed or urged to take the final step by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Well, the Saudis are involved right now in negotiations over their own nuclear program with the U.S. So it's probably, I would look there for first clues.
Well, there's another reason why it's very important, and that is that the line from the woke right, the Tucker Carlson side of MAGA, has been, this is Israel's war, and that this is the last chance they're going to have with a president who would allow, the Jewish state to pressure them into a war like this. And so they have to take advantage of it. And he has been saying that explicitly. Megyn Kelly is saying that. And that is the line you're going to hear from the, the MAGA isolationists, which is awful and not true. But if it looks like Mohammed bin Salman played the Margaret Thatcher role, it puts the lie to that. I mean, by the way, it was a lie to begin with, because it's ridiculous to think that Donald Trump was going to be pressured by anybody. But it further kind of collapses like their narrative that they were putting out, which is that, all right, they're going to do the war, and if it goes badly, it's let's blame the Jews, and that's a real thing. I mean, I think they're immune to facts and empirical reality and logic at this point, so they're going to probably say it anyway. Though, hopefully, some of this will maybe contain it, I guess, to their information ghetto.
So there are two other points to be made here. One that goes to the actual fighting, and this thing I've heard that the tide turned today has to do with the Iranian second strike capability. As Jonathan Shanzer said on yesterday's emergency podcast, the thing to fear are the Iranians have 4,000 or so ballistic missiles of different forms. Some of them are on mobile launchers. Some of them are on, in ground or in tunnels or whatever. And it's a double-edged sword, because obviously we don't want the Iranians to be firing off ballistic missiles and hitting Israel. One just hit Jerusalem. There's this hit in Beit Shemesh that killed 9 people and wounded 40. Like, you don't want that. But every time they fire, we know where the launcher is that was used to fire, and we or the Israelis can go and take out that launcher. And if those launchers are destroyed in the hundreds to thousands, the Iranians lose all capability. That's it. That's all they got. They don't have planes. We took out their Air Force. We are in the process of taking out their Navy. Trump said that we have, I think, blown up 9 ships or something like that. Took out a submarine.
They do
So
have drones.
huh?
They have drones.
They have drones. Okay,
Yeah.
so right, they have drones, but their main capability is they do have a navy and they do have these missiles. So they are in a interesting box because what they need to do is fire the missiles if they're going to fight. But if they fire the missiles and they have a stationary launcher and we can take out that launcher, then they got no way to fire the next missile, and it's just sitting there on the ground. And not only that, but we also know where that tunnel is or where they've been hiding them, and then we can go and drop a bunker buster and blow up that tunnel. So the more they respond, the easier it is for us in Israel to take out their capabilities. That's the conundrum that even they may even be facing, and we don't even know if they, as I guess Eli said, they can get in touch with the guy who's in the mountain over there and say, okay, fire at Cyprus, because their phones may not be working. The command control and communications was taken out. Israel is so in control, or whoever is so in control, that they took over the Iranian state TV airwaves and started broadcasting a speech by Bibi telling them, to stand tall and be ready to take over their government. Israel is so confident that it sent out a message a couple of hours ago to the Iranian people saying, don't rise up yet because it's too dangerous in the streets. We're still going at these targets. We'll let you know when it's safe for you to come out and start taking over the government, which is a pretty amazing. Just think about it.
It's the smart home appliances. Like the refrigerator's going to tell you when it's time to go out. Okay,
Yeah.
When the refrigerator says go, topple the regime, that's when you go.
Right, but
can I just say there's another element of this that I think is perfect, kind of for the commentary podcast to just get into here. We're watching, in some way, it feels like the culmination of 2.5 years of Israeli military brilliance and heroism, and it's remarkable. And of course, I'm very proud as a Jew. But in another way, it stands in such sharp relief to our diaspora community in America that just ran this fakakta ad on the Super Bowl about the kid who gets called a dirty Jew and a black friend tells him to fuck up. And it's a really interesting moment in some ways, because the early relationship between American Jews and Israel was that, we lobbied for them, we gave them money, we bought the Israel bonds, we were using our community's success to help this plucky, against all odds country that, had a barely functioning economy and was attacked by all its neighbors, and they really needed us. And now it feels like we're the little brother, if that makes sense. And there is a kind of disconnect. And I wonder whether some of that has, I think for us and the commentary community, we are very proud of Israel, obviously, and we're all Zionists. But I wonder if that can kind of form, and weirdly, a kind of resentment among other diaspora Jews when they see that all this incredible success from Israel. And that's why so many of the younger Jews might be susceptible to these libels about Israel's conduct in the Gaza war and so forth, and the various propaganda and BS from Peter Beinart.
I mean, that's a very interesting observation. I think what it gives the lie to is a kind of worldview that is more liberal than it is American liberal Jewish.
Sure.
That martial responses are self-defeating, and that right. The world is a web of interwoven relationships, and that what's really important is putting yourself together in a mission to better humanity through the use of multiple means of financial, logistical, moral support for good things and hostility to bad things, and this very sentimental one world idea, right? And there is Eli's daughter. Hi, Eli's daughter.
Hey, Nora.
Hi, Nora. Anyway, so and so it's very, I think it's very hard for people who are marinated in this idea to look and see a country that says the only way for us to move forward is to use our aggressive, hostile capabilities that involve the use of deadly force on a massive scale, along with the world's most powerful country. This is how we can build our future. We've been told as Americans, particularly liberal Americans and liberal American Jews, since we were little children, that this is not the way to go about things. You know, if you have a bully on the playground, you know, try to make friends with him, you know, as opposed to there's a bully on the playground, go punch him in the mouth. See, and then maybe if you punch him in the mouth, maybe he'll leave you alone or he'll have new respect for you, right? That's not how we in America think, or we're trained to think. I mean, that's the most like banal version of this.
Right, but that I think there are a lot of liberal American Jews. I mean, I don't know what, it's a deeper question, and I don't know what surveys to necessarily go to, but there are a lot of liberal American Jews that view Israel as kind of a source of embarrassment at a dinner party. Oh, I have to defend, you know, the hilltop vigilantes on the West Bank the next time, you know, I'm at some dinner party or something. And what we're really seeing is this incredible story of a country. I mean, it starts on October 7th, this horrible attack. And then people from all over, Israeli citizens from all over the world are volunteering. They have too many volunteers. This kind of military culture, this culture that we're going to defend our country. And then let's credit Netanyahu, who has the vision to understand that it's not, he can't just think of it as a war against Hamas. It's a war against the entire network of proxies that, you know, are in Iran, and this is the last phase of it. And then add to that all of these episodes of just spectacular, brilliant military brilliance that really feels like magic when you think about it. And that is all Israeli. And of course, the partnership with America makes a lot of it possible, but America's gaining a lot out of the, I mean, like the fact that the
you
Mossad
got two problems. You got two problems here.
Yeah.
So it's, as I say, we've been marinated in this idea that, you know, civilized people and, you know, from, you know, come together and try to find common ground or whatever. Okay. So there's that. And that Israel gives a lie to that, which is they kept trying. And then 5,000 people were killed and raped and injured in a single, you know, morning, on, you know, in October 2023. And they were like, okay, that's it. Goodbye. We're done. Seven countries, there are 7 organizations or countries that are attacking us. We are systematically going to go after everyone and destroy them. And it's not just going to be Gaza, because Gaza, even though Gaza is the Hamas is the one who attacked us, they're all woven together, and we know that. And then they stage this astonishing, you know, victory, dominoes toppling all over the place. You're saying, why is it that so that gives the lie to we just need to be nice and everything will be fine. And then you have the second point, which is that they have to go to a dinner party and people say, well, Israel is so mean and aggressive and terrible, and they're mean to the Arabs and all of that. And they don't have the vocabulary to say, you know, sometimes if someone's mean, they're mean for a reason, and they're not mean, they're defending their children. And so I understand that you don't think anybody should have a gun, and you don't think anybody should be able to defend themselves, and we shouldn't have cops and all of that. But you know what? That's not how the world works. They don't know how to say that. And then you have the secondary thing now, which is, Of course, every liberal in America hates Donald Trump more than they have hated any figure in my lifetime. So the fact that this is a Trump war, Trump, allied with Bibi and all of that, makes it incredibly difficult.
And there's a further complication for American Jews, American liberal Jews, and liberal Jews generally, and American liberals generally, which is that when Israel responded initially to, say, October 7th, when it went into Hamas, into Gaza, there weren't widespread videos of Gazans cheering and thanking Israelis. When they took out Hezbollah, you didn't see widespread videos of Lebanese cheering and thanking Israelis. When they took out Hezbollah leaders in Iran, you didn't see it, and so on. And it was, and even though during the Iraq War, when the U.S. went in, there were some Iraqis who actually did celebrate at the start of the war, but they were only seen by the journalists who were on the ground there. Okay. Given that all of the post-October 7th political battle has been done online, there is now a flood of videos of Persians, of Iranians cheering Trump, Netanyahu, thanking Israel, calling this not a mean, aggressive act of war, but an answered prayer, a liberation. And this is a new experience for the Trump-hating, war-hating, Bibi-hating liberal Jews. They have to reckon with this.
I mean, I hope they do, because this could be all invisible to them. We don't know what their algorithms show them.
I don't
We don't
think
know
it
what
is.
it is.
I mean, it's.
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
And of course, there's more to come, because if this scenario that Israel laid out tonight, which is we're still fighting, so stay safe. Things are unstable. And what's going on now is the battle part, and you're not involved in it, Iranian civilians. You can protect yourselves, and then we'll let you know when you can go out into the streets. And if they do, and they go out in the streets and they say we're happy the regime is over, we want, by the millions, that will be undeniable. And that's the thing, of course, the dog that didn't bark in Gaza, that I think was important for the Israeli public. That is going to be a twist here, because people kept saying, where are the Gazans celebrating the fact that they've been liberated from Hamas? And believe me, Israeli soldiers and troops were wondering the same thing. And in Israel, this was kind of like the final stake in the heart of the people who hoped against hope for the ability to make peace with the Palestinians. That
hold on. Hold on.
Okay.
There was a moment. We know, if you go back to like March, April, May, we were seeing lots of videos of regular Gazans telling Hamas to leave. And then there was the ceasefire. And then Hamas started killing so-called collaborators.
Right.
And that was enough violence to shut everybody up, because they're still around.
But I mean, during the war.
Oh, sure, during the war. Yeah.
Before,
but also when they rose up against, like when they protested against Hamas, there was never a like Palestinians and Israelis in Milan or something partying on a balcony together. Like there was no thank you Israel for doing it. There was no sentiment.
We've seen in London, we've seen in LA, and we've seen in DC. Right. This Iranian, and of course the demented, fascinating politics. Since we're talking about liberals in America, because what else are we going to do? That Ahmed, Zohran Mamdani.
Oh, that was amazing. I can't believe that. Yeah.
Expressed his support for the Iranian community in New York, and his sorrow that and understanding that they deserve protection from this incredibly unjust and illegitimate attack on their country. What do you think the percentage is of Iranians in the United States who support the overthrow of the Islamic Republic? Do you think it's 99.2%? Because that might be low. Now, there are people who are worried about their families. I'm sure there are. I mean, there's 992% and Sohrab Ahmari, and that's it. That's as far as and Trita Parsi. That, as far as I can tell, though, Trita Parsi and Sohrab Ahmari are the only Iranians publicly who are saying that this is a mistake. And just generally speaking, every Iranian in the United States is in the United States because they had to leave Iran, or their families had to leave Iran because of the revolution. And they are centered in New York and DC and LA. And a lot of them are Jews, but they're not all Jews.
No.
And if there's one thing that binds them, it is hatred of the Islamic Republic of Iran, of a sort that, like makes the Cuban hatred of Castro look like, like mild anger. So that
they're not, and they're not quiet about it. I mean, they're
not
out
at all.
there,
Right. And they're cheering and they're dancing.
I saw Mamdani's tweet and I was like, he's never met a Persian in his life.
Right. No, but I mean that, of course. Well, he has, or he met 3 Persians.
He's met an as a Persian. He's got an as a Persian on staff, maybe like he's got the
Right. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, when you read that and you see that, you understand that the world that people like him live in is not the same world that we live in, and therefore that helps explain a little bit the one very troubling sign so far. And it's only 36 to 48 hours since all of this started, but that Snap polling is showing very. I mean, there are a couple of polls that say it's fine, and there are a couple of polls that say it's good that we took out the Ayatollah, but not a lot of public support for the war, and these subsidiary questions like, does Trump use force too much? Is he too quick to use force? And like 56 to 57% of Americans say he does in 2 different polls that came out this afternoon. Like not that much support, 20 to 40%, depending on how you calculate it. And so the question is, I guess this goes to Eli's point. Oh, go ahead, Abe. I'm sorry.
I just want to say this is before something we should get into. Obviously, the tragic news of the fact of the 3 U.S. service members have been killed so far in this.
Right.
And as that news becomes more widely known, settles in, and as the enemies of this operation use that as a cudgel, the support could even get lower.
I know, but I mean, look, 3 American servicemen have died in the first 48 hours of a conflict. Granted, we are not used to Americans. By the way, bizarrely, look, in the first Gulf War in 1990, 100 Americans died in the single most lopsided battlefield victory in the history of mankind. It was like Agincourt times a billion. But if we're starting to get to the point at which the American people are going to say that the tragic loss of 3 servicemen in the Middle East means that the mission is morally illegitimate, then we have a lot worse problems in this country and its future than I even imagined that we have.
I think we are at that point, and we do have those problems. I mean, this is why talk.
Bring me down.
I'm your man. This is why
I'm with John on this. By the way,
but let me just make this point that this is why talks of boots on the ground has been anathema for years now, because the idea is, if one American life is going to, and I understand it, is going to be put in jeopardy or lost for a war that I'm not clear or necessarily clear in my support of its aims, then a travesty has taken place here. And that is the tide that we are fighting against here. I think that is especially because you've got Trump, who has been, railing against forever wars and boots on the ground and guaranteeing no boots on the ground and no boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, no occupation and no drawn out. No. So I think that is where we are. Yeah.
All right. So just a couple points on that. George W. Bush in 2000 campaigned on the idea, and Condi Rice said it at the convention: America will not be the world's 911, which, has a
weird number.
A weird number in light of what happened.
People have used, yeah.
And then he comes up, he becomes the most interventionist president, since, you could argue the 60s. And the other point to make is that it's too soon to tell. We're in the middle of this right now. So if there are more, and it's single digits, but the result is a civil war in Iran, and we don't know where the loose nuclear material is, and it becomes this huge problem, then this will look as another intervention failure. But if Trump can pull it off, and Israel can pull it off, that you manage to effect a decent transition to something better than what we have now, which is the worst, and you see those scenes of Iranians in jubilation in the streets, and there is no more nuclear program, there is no missile program for Iran, and we did it without boots on the ground, then that is a new paradigm for American national security.
Yes, and the capabilities that we have now to do that, right?
That's the other thing.
We have we have the technological capabilities to take this and branch it out and make this the central idea of a grand strategy. We didn't have the ability necessarily to do it before with people sitting so far from the battlefield, but we have this ability to go into places and take these precision sort of acts and actions, because we have the bases, like the woke right and the people and isolationists, they complain, why are we still here? Why are we still there? All these years after World War II and stuff like that, because they're not to drop off soldiers, but they are to be these bases from which we can fly jets and drones and missiles and things like that. But also, they were able to take the time in the past month or whatever it's been, few weeks, to move missile defense into position. Some missile defense in Israel, some missile defense, in around the region where the U.S. has its own bases and stuff like that. So that's a capability now that we can do, wider and more often.
I just want to add something to my point. I'm not saying that that this public sentiment about combat deaths and boots on the ground is healthy or right or productive. And to that point, I want to note that the people who are going to make who are going to try to turn this into a scandal are undoubtedly the same people who say it's good that we got out of Afghanistan because it was a forever war and reasons, and 13 U.S. service members were killed in that withdrawal itself.
Yeah. Look, I think what you lay out, and this is crucially important, Trump spoke and said today, he looks at this as a 4-week operation. So he's not necessarily putting a time limit on it, but at least he's not saying we'll be out by Thursday, right? And the reason I say at least is not that I want this to continue forever, but particularly given the fact that he does not yet have the full support of the American people, or even the partial support of the American in all this. He has made a huge gamble on this mission, and he needs to see it through. Like he needs to not preemptively stop it or take some weird off ramp. He needs to get the result that will indicate what we are talking about here, that the regime has fallen, that the path forward is a better path, that the pro-American sentiment that we have been hearing for 2 generations is deep inside the hearts of of what constitutes the Iranian middle class, that they are activated and that they are ready and willing to work with the United States, to work with contractors who will help them rebuild. This is something that Jonathan Shanzer talked about again on yesterday's podcast, that there will be a lot of work to be done after, cleanup and reconstruction of infrastructure and all of that. And if he can say, we did this, everything is on the right path, go ahead, tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did wrong. What bad happened here? And every time we have been close in the last 30 years to achieving that victory, as Charlie Wilson said, we F up the end game. We end it too soon. We don't get the final result that we need to have. And that Charlie Wilson said that about Afghanistan, about the sort of the everything that happened that then led up to 9/11. And after the Gulf War, George H.W. Bush listened to Colin Powell and ended the war with not only with Saddam in power, but allowing him to fly his helicopters around the South so that the Kurdish uprising so that he could slaughter the Kurds. And, we declared mission accomplished way too early in Iraq in 2003 and put our faith in an election strategy that was clearly too green to achieve the result that we wanted. So looking at all of the dumb mistakes, having decided that the problem isn't that Americans fight wars, but that he wasn't the guy in charge of America when it fought the wars, needs to take a lesson from where things went wrong and do what Israel basically has done here in the last 2.5 years and crush the enemy so that the enemy stays crushed. And so that the enemy acknowledges that the enemy is crushed, which is the World War II analogy, right? It's that we needed the Nazis and the Japanese to know that they were dead and that there was no coming back, and that we had to break their spirits and crush their hopes and their ambitions. And
there's one more thing maybe worth mentioning along that point, is that usually anywhere there's an insurgency, it's funded by Iran.
Right. So if Iran's not there
anymore, taking out Iran will, presumably affect the ability of,
that's one of the things I'm worried about, which is that they have guns, and if they decide to go underground and head to the hills, they will have a great advantage in an insurgency because there won't be boots on the ground. I agree, by the way, we shouldn't have boots on the ground because they're a magnet for the other jihadists, and because we don't want our guys to be manning checkpoints and training police and having a repeat of and Trump is wise to avoid that. So it is a huge gamble, but I also think that there's reason to be optimistic. I have to believe that the Mossad and the CIA have something, planned for the day after. I hope they do. So we'll see, and that's the big thing. But if he can pull this off, I think it's enormous for us, for the region, in terms
but Seth makes a really important point as I reflect on what he said about the Iranians and the insurgencies. So the counter effort against the United States in Iraq was was two-sided, right? There were sort of two fronts. There was the Sunni government, the Shias,
No, the
supported by
Iranians
Iran.
were coordinating both Sunni and Shia,
Yeah,
but yes, you're right. It was coming from
right,
Syria too. Right.
right. So the Iranians not there for themselves. In other words, like there's no external organizing principle that they can use to sort of like interfere with their own country. They will their leadership and the people who know how to do what they know how to do will have been crushed, which then starts raising questions about what you do with the IRGC, with 125,000 people in the IRGC. Do you give them amnesty? Do you know, remember the United States made what people now think to have been a terrible strategic blunder in firing the Iraqi army, right? Like basically letting the Iraqi, instead of paying them off or trying to transition them into some other force that they all then took their, they all took their guns and went, they had nothing left and all that. So I don't know how all of that goes, but if a lot of this depends on the idea that, you know, Iran has proved itself over the last 2 years to be a much more of a paper tiger than we ever expected that they would be. I don't think we anticipated, or the Israelis anticipated, the ease with which the Israeli and American operations against Iran would go from after October 7th. Like they didn't know. The Iraqis, both, you know, in the 90s and then in the early 2000s, were only 10 or 15 years divorced from the 8-year war that they had fought against Iran, which they had basically won. So they were a seasoned military.
Well, but they put up no resistance from the initial invasion.
No, but
it was the insurgency that the Baathists and every dirtbag in the region joined the insurgency.
What are you talking about? No, I'm talking about the Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah, I'm saying Iraq. When we went into Iraq,
I'm not talking about that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about that.
No, I'm saying Iran. When Iraq,
right?
I know, but when we went into Iraq in 2003,
right?
And we obviously overwhelmed we won the war in 6 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. But that was still an active military that had been involved in military activity constantly for 20 years. The Iranians have not been an active military for 20 years. They futz around in Iraq and do stuff like that, but they're not seasoned and trained, and like they just weren't as good as we thought they were.
Well, I would argue. Well, okay. No, I would say it a little differently. Their main Iranian military was their Revolutionary Guard Corps and their Quds Force. That was an irregular kind of insurgency building operation that involved in terrorism, and the IRGC has become the kind of mafia of the state. They own, I don't know, some very large percentage of the economy at this point.
Yeah.
And they were always like the A team.
Right.
And then, you know, the assumption was that they would have a competent air defense system and everything like that. The Israelis overwhelmed it. And I think you're right in the sense that they just never imagined they would be invaded, or they would never be imagined they would be attacked like this.
But their purpose, was, of course, to quell domestic discontent.
Well, no, the IRGC's purpose was to spread the Islamic Revolution, and then the Basijis and the MOIS, their intelligence service was. But yes, there were several layers of all these regime security forces.
Right.
It's interesting.
Look, I don't mean to be Pollyannish. All I'm saying is we don't know. The circumstances here suggest that Trump can score, and Bibi or Israel, whatever, can score a kind of new kind of victory here,
right?
And that will require the will to sustain and to not get thrown off track. And I think Trump benefits a little bit from this weird Mamdani, you know, this kind of bizarre tone deafness about how Americans and whatever think about this. On the one hand, on the other, this idea that the Democrats seem fixated on because there are jokes about it, and now there are tweets about it, and there was a thing on SNL about it, that Trump did this to distract from the Epstein files.
Right.
Now, if that's the level of attack that liberals and leftists and like actually want to sustain, if that's where their minds go, he really actually then comes out as the more serious person with more, doing something that's purposeful and serious. And I know it's like catnip for them. They can't resist it. They just can't avoid it.
But the fascinating thing, by the way, is that the regime accounts on social media have adopted the line that it's a distraction about Epstein, calling it Operation Epstein
Fury. Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, welcome to the 21st century in social media, but it's like, that's kind of interesting too. But I mean, that used to be the kind of thing that would make a Democrat feel a little uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's not great that our attack ad is being repurposed by our mortal enemy in the middle of a war. But I mean, who knows at this point? I mean, I also think it's interesting that I kind of going back to the casualties thing, right? I mean, it's still, it's disgusting in my view to say that, we launched a war, but like Israel and America killed those servicemen because they put them in harm's way, which is a line we're already hearing from like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker. But there is at a certain point, like these people have, Tucker gave this speech in December. We're the America First wing of MAGA. And they're all about America First, America First, America First. Careful, buddy. Watch it, because you're going to start sounding like you're kind of Iran first if you're going to blame their violence on us. And I just think at a certain point, they're going to be very vulnerable to that kind of thing. It's not there. They've had he's had a pretty smooth ride up to now. And then the other big question is, he called this war disgusting. How many ticks away from Tucker just attacking Trump? And if he does that, then that opens up wonderful space with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance can't stay with Tucker if he's attacking Trump.
Right.
J.D. Vance can stay with Tucker if he's attacking Jews.
Yeah.
If he's attacking other Republicans, that's fine. But if he goes after Trump, he's got to make a choice.
Right.
And at that point, does Tucker kind of get sent to Elba and, okay, fine, you'll have a very popular podcast, just like Alex Jones did. Conspiracy theorists and kooks and nuts will tune in, but you will never have a home in the Republican Party again. Baruch Hashem, we can hope.
Well, something very interesting is happening with J.D. Vance here, I think. We know that Nick Fuentes hated J.D. Vance and said horrible things about his wife and his kids and him. But Vance's gamble was, in my mind, I can still not lose the Fuentes contingent, more largely speaking. And with this war, they are out there talking about how he has failed them, how he was always a closet neocon or never cared about anything, and anyone who thought otherwise got suckered in. So he's getting the treatment that they all, it's the no honor among thieves, no honor among groypers or anti-Semites. He's getting the full treatment now. For all his footsie, it's falling apart because of this involvement.
It's worse than that, as you would put it, for Nick Fuentes and for Vance playing footsie with him, because Nick Fuentes this morning said, everybody who's listening to me needs to vote for the Democrats. That is the thing you cannot say in Donald Trump's ear. He said it, by the way, for what it's worth, he said it in 2024 too. Okay. Well, this is where Donald Trump will say, but right now, as he's looking at 2026 and everything like that, he will send a bunker buster to drop on Nick Fuentes' head if Fuentes goes on like this.
And he will be greeted as liberator.
That's not a fair fight for Nick Fuentes. So, it's striking. My sister who was on yesterday, and I talked to her all day, and she's like, there's another siren. I'm going in the shelter. I'm out of the shelter. I'm gotta go back into the shelter. I'm in. I'm out. I'm out. I'm in. I'm in. There's a attack on Beit Shemesh. A building is blown up in Tel Aviv. There's an attack in Jerusalem. Again, 100% of people in Israel, maybe not 100%, but an enormous, the country is going in and out of shelters under ballistic missile attack from Iran, cheerful and happy and thrilled with the future. You have the political system. You have Bibi's two chief rivals for possible premiership in later this year, backing this effort, saying we have we are not divided. This is an existential threat that we are dealing with in Israel that will make our life better. This nation of purpose knows what it's about. It's willing to go into the shelters. It's better than it was going into the shelters for the Gaza war. Because, of course, there it was, a war for survival to destroy this enemy, that had done this terrible thing. So every time you went into the shelters, you were sort of reminded that you were there. The hostages were in Gaza, and it's like grim purpose, right? This is something else going on here. This is the fulfillment of an understanding in Israel 2 to 4 decades in length that says we will never be safe with this regime in Tehran, and we do not have the means or the ability to take it down. And the main continuing two issues of the last 25 years in Israel have been, of course, how to deal with Palestinian Hamas terrorism and then how to deal with Iran, beginning with Ahmadinejad starting to announce when he became president in 2005 that the goal of the regime was the destruction of Israel, and saying that Israel would not exist for very much longer. That is what he said, the civilian president, the one who was elected. That
too late for him.
So, and that's why, by the way, that's why I wanted to end on this. It is really meaningful and important that Ahmadinejad was killed today or yesterday, even though he has not been president for 12 years, something like that.
Right.
Because we have long memories, we Jews, and he made it clear that he was the vanguard of the idea that Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth. And we have long memories, and he's dead. And let's see who does it. Let's see who does it next, and thinks that it's something that you can play and toy with. That you're a country, you're going to develop a nuclear weapon, and you're going to take Israel out. Because even after you leave power, even when you're living as a weird academic former president, even though you were arrested months ago for possibly planning a coup,
right?
You're not safe.
The one weird thing about it is that the revolution has turned on so many of its own that inside of Iranian politics, for what it was, Ahmadinejad was somebody who was calling for significant reform, if not a new order, hence the arrest for the coup and everything like that. Now, do I think he's changed his stripes when it came to his hatred of Jews and denial of the Holocaust? I don't. But I'm just noting that it's interesting because the decision is not just knock off the top 10 people. It's going pretty deep. Which is
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, at this point, I think the only people left at the top command are Mossad.
Probably. But I am just saying, let the world know that we have a long memory, and that is why this is meaningful. I mean,
we took out, remember, during the course of the last, in the past year, so we took out, one of the planners of the Marine barracks bombing in '83. This people who had done terrible things decades ago.
The Ayatollah, the new Ayatollah, the second Spinal Tap drummer, planned the Argentina
Right.
the killing of the 180 Jews in Argentina in 1994. So we have a long memory. Don't F with us. That's Israel is now in a position to say we, we take care of family business, right? I mean, it's, the Munich, this started with the idea that the Munich terrorists
Right.
all needed to be eliminated, and it'll take as long as it was necessary to eliminate them. And that now, having that you're just a member of Black September doesn't, you can be the head of an international criminal organization. You can be a former president of the country and no longer be in power. And we are not going to forget what you did. And this is a very serious thing about Ahmadinejad, because I was reflecting on the fact that we had not been talking about the need to deal with the Iranian nuclear program until Ahmadinejad started marching around going, we're going to get a nuclear bomb and destroy Israel.
Right.
Which shifted us into this 20-year 20-year problem that has now reached its resolution. And so,
It's also the end of
bookends.
Bibi's. It's for Bibi, it's the culmination of his his own sort of 30-year quest. This is,
Right.
He's got this.
He
kind
says
of,
40. He said
40.
today.
He's 40.
He said
So
today, this is what my public life has been aiming toward for 40 years. And remember, 42 years ago in Lebanon, in the barracks, the Iranian front group Hezbollah killed 242 Marines. And the American response then was to pull out of Lebanon. And the American response today is to destroy regimes. What's the better response? I mean, granted, there are many people listening, or maybe not listening, who would think that the better response isn't to go and destroy the regime. But they're wrong and we're right, and we're going to end here. So,
Yeah.
Eli
Put another
Lake.
way, don't start none, won't be none.
There you go. Eli Lake, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back tomorrow and every day until we have to stop. For Abe and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.